All right, welcome everybody. We are on the other side of that crazy psychedelic portal called the Vibrant Introduction. A little bit of an early start this week as we are meeting with Mike Wilkerson, better known as Stellium7, all the way over across the pond in Spain, starting at 8 p.m. for him. Very cool of you to make some time in your evening and hang out with us again. It's been something since we last did an episode together on my show InnerVerse that I've wanted to make happen. Watching you and Gabe, aka Slick Dissident, have a mind meld that will melt minds.
I'm just going to sit back and watch him go.
I'm the one who's going to sit back. I'm the one relaxing here. Well, welcome guys, and welcome to everybody on both Slick's channel and Stellium7 channel. It's really cool to already have a nice turnout popping up, and this is going to be a really fun couple of hours. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Fun to be here. Thanks for dragging me out of hibernation.
Yeah, it's been a couple months, huh?
Yeah. When is it? How long has it been since we talked? It's all a blur at this point for me.
Oh, that's a huge question. I've done
mind.
a lot of stuff since then. Definitely, I would say like in the realm of 4 to 6 months. I don't know.
Yeah, and I've been meaning to put that up on my channel, but I haven't done any of my own content lately, and I didn't want to just overload everyone with a bunch of interviews. So people who haven't seen that conversation, that it's on the InnerVerse podcast.
That's right, dude. And it sounds like you're taking a page out of the same book that I'm working through right now, which is quality over quantity. If you're, paring back, hibernating for the winter and all that, it seems as if all the conscious people got that memo at the same time. And all the ways that mindset applies, that perspective shift applies, keep unfolding in various fractal expansions. It's like, it's the new thing. That's the golden age, quality over quantity.
Yeah, I was just overloaded with content. I mean, one of the things when you become a content creator is you end up making friends with a lot of other content creators. And each and every one of them is pumping out tons of info. So after a while, it becomes absolutely impossible to keep up. And it's almost a stressor. And I'm listening to stuff at 2x speeds and still can't get to it all. So I decided to just take a break. And I've been focusing on finishing a book that I wrote a long time ago. And then I did a second version of it. And now I've really tricked it out. I dropped 100 pages from it, and it's going, if all goes well, it's going to a proofreader in another week or so. So I'm going to be launching that in May. I'm planning on going to the US, going to go to Texas to the Confluence conference, and then I hope to see what I can do. I'm planning on setting up a book tour to the best of my ability. And and for those who don't know, it has nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about today.
We should talk a little bit about that story though. But Gabe, I want you to jump in here. I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk to Mike for ages.
Yes, absolutely. I had no idea that this meeting was going to happen when I was making the claim last year that the elephant is the room, in the fact that we are in this age of grand revelation and connection of minds and networking, that the context of the weaves that we are capable of is something that it just blows the mind. I'm so grateful. Mike, what part of Spain are you in? If you don't mind.
In the Costa Blanca, which is basically, I live right smack in the middle between Valencia and Alicante.
Wow.
So it's a beautiful part of the world I'm in. Ooh, Topher's in the chat. Hey, Topher. Hi, Wendy.
Topher.
Hi, everybody.
Big love, Topher. I was just filling his ear with all kinds of ideas, and that had to do with Spain. I just turned Topher on to Tom Carberry's work this morning. Sent him a link. Mike, if you ever get the chance, Tom Carberry has an old channel. He's not putting anything out, and it's actually very digestible bites but he has a strong belief that Barcelona might actually be a occulted Jerusalem. And he makes a really good case for that. And so I think that would be rewarding for you, because he has found a lot of locations and lakes, rivers and streams, and mapped them onto New Testament claims. And he has a really solid idea that the 1300s should be considered the year zero, and to have more fidelity to what people call history. So that's a fun one for you. Since you're in Spain, you can check out what he's talking about.
Yeah, I will. Definitely an interesting subject. I've dug a lot into Ben, the archivist's work, and also Longo, Old World Florida. And there's a lot to suggest that the old world of the Bible was actually in North America, which is an interesting subject matter. So I think there were multiple Jerusalems and multiple Bethlehems, and it seems like there was a photocopy, carbon copy of these different stories and different names all over the place. So
I think it has something to do with sacred toponymy, you could call it, or sacred geography, that the regions that were controlled by whatever this universal ancient empire and its priesthood were named. Their naming conventions were all based on the same pattern, which was to reflect and mimic the astrotheology in the system. So then you would get, you'd be able to find the fingerprints of that all over the place. The most basic being that so many ancient cities are named after the name of a deity or god, if you understand the roots of the names of those words.
Yes. Last night I did a live with my buddies, Chris Miner and PK came onto my channel, and we were talking about the play Aristophanes' The Frogs and how it relates to the Keck frog, and some of the political intrigue around Athens at that time is, like we were saying, just a cut and paste onto the situation on the world stage today. It's very informative. But in that show, we were looking at Thomas Hobbes' cover art of the Leviathan. It's kind of a keystone piece of work, as that is, a lot of people will talk about the social contract. And if they mention social contract, you have to ask them, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's social contract or Thomas Hobbes's social contract, because they're kind of different in significant ways. But on the cover art, there's a star fort hiding out right there on the front of this book. And so I think that goes unseen by a lot of people. They breeze right over it, but it's a crystal clear right there in plain sight. There's a star fort on Thomas Hobbes' book, The Leviathan. So yeah, if anybody wants to check that out, it's pretty revealing.
Well, you just mentioned two topics, Leviathan and star forts, that kind of got me onto all this research in the first place. So the star fort thing, I learned about that originally from Andreas Exertus from his channel like 7 years ago. And I had no idea about those things. And it turned out, after I started looking into it more and more, I was like, wait a minute, I've lived inside of these things. And then when I added up the different places that I've lived inside of 7 different star forts in my life.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I moved to Italy as an exchange student in '97, and the first place that I lived was in Siena, and that's a massive, old, beautiful star fort with an incredible cathedral. It's like zebra striped and sits up on the hill, and it's a really unique city with incredible tradition. And then from there I moved to Padova, which was an even bigger star citadel, which was in the mainstream historical narrative, that's the second oldest university in the world, is in Padova. And it's something like 850 years old or something, according to what they want to tell us. Also happens to be the home of the heliocentric model, because you had Galileo was a professor there, and I think Copernicus was active there for a while. The supposed first, what do you call astronomy, when they look observatory is in that city as well. And
Wow.
it has the largest piazza in Europe, a square. And if you look at it, you can see it on Google Earth. It's shaped like the 4-continent system that's on the old maps at the north. It's got the 4 channels going in and out of it. And then it's ringed by 2 rows of marble sculptures, which I think is representative of the ice wall, perhaps. And basically our mainstream scientific model emerged from there. And then from there, I moved to Rome. I lived in Rome for 2 years, and that's another gigantic star citadel. And then I lived in 3 or 4 different places in Sweden that were all star forts. And so I didn't even know about that subject matter. And then I got on a Discord with a bunch of guys that were all digging deep into this stuff. And one of them was a guy named Mike, and his handle's 13th Monkey. I don't see him in the chat, but he's been mapping them for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and he's up to something like 10,000 of those things.
Wow.
So they're on every continent. You can find them. You can see them with Google Earth buried underground, but the imprint is still there, even though it's covered in mud. And that was just a huge eye opener for me when I looked into that, because the mainstream historical narrative about those things is laughable, that they were built between the 15th and 17th century to, protect against cannon fire. And no, it's way deeper than that. And then Leviathan, that was, the great battle between the behemoth and the Leviathan, is something that's spoken of. I think it's Plato or one of the Greek philosophers, and describes this great battle between a giant serpent and a giant fish-like creature. And the first exposure I had to that was through Mud Fossil University's channel, which also got me on the topic of mud fossils, which was a fascinating subject, where the idea that petrification might happen far, far more quickly than we were taught. And so Roger was describing this battle between these 2 great beasts. And we're talking about creatures that are practically the size of continents, 1,000-mile long dragon and a fish that's not quite so long but far bigger. And he's looking at different parts of North Africa and showing how those creatures are still there. And I thought, okay, this is pretty far-fetched. I'm not going to just buy this one, hook, line, and sinker. But the more I listened to him, the more I was like, wow, there's something to it. And then he starts quoting one of the Greek philosophers and this battle that took place. And that was really the penny drop for me that got me looking at the elephant is the room, as you said. And investigating this mountain here in Spain that is known as Montgo, and looks a heck of a lot like a 3-mile long, 1 mile tall elephant. So that was how it all began for me. So
Yes.
good intro.
I want to add, you got to keep in mind, from the words of many Greek philosophers themselves and authors of the ancient text, that you can't necessarily trust the Greeks in anything. But have you ever considered, though,
I don't trust any of history now.
on this great serpent question, have you ever looked into the possibility? I mean, it's hard to investigate, right? But that the ice wall that is called Antarctica could be the remains of a serpent creature?
Yeah, I mean, the Ouroboros, if you think of the Norse mythology with the world tree, Yggdrasil, at the center, and then it's, you've got the Earth disk, and then it's surrounded by the Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its own tail. So, yeah. In fact, I heard, who was it? I was listening to something recently, and they were hypothesizing that there's actually a great, this is all a construct that we're in, and that there's actually a giant particle accelerator that is the Ouroboros. And I thought that was a fascinating idea. It's all up for grabs at this point. Well,
you're muted, Slick.
Thank you. I've had some fun in my research around this Leviathan and the Behemoth, and starting with what they posit in Plato's Republic. And I've discovered that these are also two different forms of government, and that the Leviathan tends to be more naval oriented, and they also tend to be more democratic. And the Behemoth is more land based, they're more army oriented, and they're much more oligarchical. These two opposing forms of government. But
Which
here,
is the serpent?
the serpent is Leviathan, and Behemoth is, I think, a giant mastodon elephant, in my opinion,
Really?
because it's land, it's earth based. And do you guys remember in the Lord of the Rings when the elf guy, who I can never say his name, he runs up the back of the elephant and he shoots the elephant in the head, and he does a brilliant
Legolas.
slide. Legolas, thank you. And he does the slide down the tusk, and then he lands on his feet looking like a real badass.
Remember
After
that scene? Yeah.
Yep, he's slaying the Behemoth because it was an elephant.
Oh yeah, yeah. Those. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that
Yes,
I've had that scene, and I clipped that out and had that in a few of my videos.
wonderful, wonderful.
Anything involving giant elephants attracts my attention.
Yes, yes. So I've speculated that that is a stellar phenomenon. And now keep in mind, I'm always with 50-50s. I'm either 100% right or 100% wrong. But I have discovered that November 5th is the peak expression of a particular meteor shower that is called the South Taurid meteor showers. And my buddy PK and I, we tracked this meteor shower. It actually progresses across the heavens just like an actor on a stage performing glorious feats on a massive scale above everybody's head. And November 5th is election day. It's election week. The South Taurid meteor showers are a large window on that week after all the monsters have gone away from Samhain and Halloween. After the monsters have gone away, the urban people would actually migrate to the cities to cast their vote so that a hero will come and save us from all those monsters that were roaming through the streets. And I actually have my star map here. I actually believe we watched this meteor shower run up the back of the Cetus constellation, just like Legolas. And it goes right up towards the head, and then it has a phase out. It actually disappears right here at the ecliptic plane. It disappears, and there's a couple-day pause, and then it turns into what they call the North Taurid meteor shower, and it pops up again right above the elliptic plane and progresses forward onto Taurus. And so I completely am convinced that when we watch actors on the stage doing these amazing feats that give us the goosebumps, we harmonize to the valor displayed on the screen. I am quite convinced that most of what we've been entrained onto are stellar phenomena. And I'm low grade obsessed. I try not to get too obsessed. I just, it's like a side hobby for me. But I've mapped out approximately 20 major meteor showers, and they all reveal great layers and layers of the human psychology and mass. And that's one I would love to share with you. Cetus, or I'm sorry, yeah, the Cetus constellation is more of a sea monster. It's very nondescript. It's hard to pinpoint what it is. So again, with the 50-50, like I think of it as the Leviathan sea monster, but in the film, they were depicting it as an elephant. So it could be Behemoth. So again, I'm not going to say one way or the other. Maybe it's interchangeable depending on the cinematic experience. Maybe when we need to be more nautical in our social engineering, maybe they show us a film where somebody's slaying a sea monster. And when we need to be more oligarchical or more Behemoth land-based, maybe they pull up a film with somebody slaying an elephant.
Interesting. I swing back and forth between, is it anthropomorphism, or is it literal, or is it both? And we live in a paradoxical realm, that's holographic and fractal. So then it could be both, right?
Yes.
And when you think of the trunk of the elephant, it's the way it moves around, and it's snake-like and everything. And you've got the Medusa, you've got Cthulhu, you have all of these different characters. I think that these are definitely metaphors for some plasma electrical event that is probably what's responsible for the destruction that happens periodically in the realm and leads to things like instant petrification. So all these subjects are really interesting to me. Definitely.
I'll add about Cetus, Gabe, that that constellation, in my opinion, is a representative of the exact cycle Mike is talking about, the destruction and regeneration cycle. Because first of all, the most obvious usage of the constellation for that symbolism is Jonah in the belly of the whale, in the astrotheology behind that particular myth. Understanding the equivalency of symbols and the monomyth of the destruction and regeneration of the world being the one that's the foundation or core of all the other myths, you understand that the whale that, or the giant fish that swallows the flood hero of whatever particular story, or that the god or goddess turns themselves into to escape from the deluge, is the same as the ark, because it's the vessel in which the being that represents the transition between ages is rescued and carried within. And in some of the origin stories that the Greeks give of Cetus, the sea monster, it's a creature born out of the primordial chaos. So that's the exact same as the cosmic egg. So we're talking about a symbol of something that encloses and then opens. And I think on the microcosm, you could consider that like the fish, the whale, the boat, the doors of the boat opening when Noah comes out. That's the new age of humanity. But on the macrocosm, maybe there's something to the opening and closing of the firmament that is involved in the birth of a new age.
Yeah, I just saw an interview with Martin Kenny on the channel Rise Up.
He's still doing stuff?
He resurfaced. I haven't seen anything from him in ages. I came across his stuff like 7 years ago when he came out with his cosmic egg theory and his model of what he believed our world is. And I always thought it was fascinating. I'm not attached to any particular shape or model. I don't.
He did some great paper mache.
Really know. He did. And then Norb collaborated with him and put out some incredible 3D animations, bringing it to life. So
that was life-changing. The Norb's videos were like the perspective shift for me about the Earth shape question.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that combined with digging into the subject of toroids and how magnetism works and the flow. It was just like, wow, this makes so much sense. And it's, how do you verify it? But you mentioned the periodic opening and closing, and Martin Kenny had this kind of Russian doll sort of a model with concentric spheres that were either energetic or physical, which is your music of the spheres, where the planets are the wandering stars are making their rounds. And I was really fascinated because I didn't know about Venus having phases. And so he posited the idea that Venus and Mars were a binary, just like our sun and moon, and that Jupiter and Saturn were also binary, and they were like outer rings. And I thought this, and he even I think he even mentioned it, or maybe I thought of it on my own, but this idea that maybe we live in a realm that's like a tree that has growth rings and is expanding outward. And so at the center, the North Pole, we talk about Sophia, the black sun, being this, or Mercury, being the mixing of those opposites, and then that gives birth to new cycles in the form of new binaries. I was like, wow, this is far out stuff. It resonated with me. And yeah, proving it, that's another thing.
You know, I think it was almost 2 years back after watching your presentation on the heart stones. It completely altered my perception of reality instantly. And I went directly out into the backyard here where I had a stone garden, just a ton of just smaller than fist size stones, tons of them. And I just went through all of this pile of rocks. Mike, I kid you not. Yes, looking just like this. And I was able to collect enough to make maybe a 20-foot radius ring of heart stones that I found just in the pile in my backyard. I put them side by side, right next to each other, and I encircled the trunk of this grandmother tree that was in our backyard. And it was just amazing how abundantly available they are once you have the eyes to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe, that this pattern hasn't been recognized and discussed before I came out with these videos. I mean, people, it's a mind blow how frequent it is, but we're taught not to see it. We're told that soft tissue can't petrify because it'll be eaten away by larvae and worms and whatever else, bacteria, long before it would ever turn to stone. So I coined the term paradigm blindness because I realized we're just blinded to reality because of the paradigm that we grow up in. And this is true of a lot of members of academia when it comes to all kinds of different subjects. They're just fitting everything that they are learning and coming across into a model that is inaccurate. And so, like a broken clock, you're right a couple times a day, and every once in a while things seem to work, but the broader picture of what they're describing is inaccurate. And I think that that's definitely true of geology.
Yes.
There's so much evidence. And last time I was on with Chance, it was a far more visual presentation. and I went through a lot of examples of the petrification of giant creatures or megaflora, and also the heartstone stuff. But we're walking around and we're told these stories about sedimentary layering and pressure creating these rock layers, and then tectonic activity breaking them up and creating our mountains, and then breaking off into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's how these stones are formed. But I think if that were the case, this pattern that I've recognized and documented thoroughly, which is highly specific and doesn't make any sense when it comes to random banging around in a river bottom, it's proof that there's something else going on. And the fact that it hasn't been described, I mean, the thing is, all hearts take on they're different sizes depending on the species of the creature, right? They're different. They have a different morphology. An elephant's heart is very round and big, and a giraffe's heart is long and narrow, kind of like the giraffe, And so they're gonna take lots of different overall forms, but the general makeup is the same across the hearts because of it's the same design. And so they're there, and they're easy to spot once you've learned the pattern, which I've shared a lot on my channel. And I get people sending me pictures from all over the world with these, oftentimes better examples than what I've shown, because they're still fleshy. Like the stones in this region, I don't know if it's multiple resets or if they just had more time to erode, and the sunlight and the other factors have taken away that color. But oftentimes when you put them underwater, they turn pink or even red, even though they looked white to begin with. So, and if you break them open, which I've done, or I've sliced them, I've polished them, I've broken them open, I've had them CAT scanned. And like this one I found the other day, check this out. It's the same pattern, which I've shared a tremendous amount on my channel, and it's got a chunk missing right there, right? And you can see it if yeah. It's red, but the heart is covered in a fatty sac known as the pericardium, and it's the thickest of the sacs of all of the organs. So if there was any organ that was most likely to survive some intense cataclysm involving heat or electricity or plasma, it's the heart. And I couldn't understand why I would be finding organs outside of the body. It was like, what? Where's the rest of the body? I could understand if it was petrified and attached to some other body part and it was just sitting there. But that wasn't the case at all. He's just sitting there by themselves. Like, how does that happen? Well, the only possible explanation, well, some people were asking me, like, what was this? Some widespread, sacrificial ritual where they remove the organs and then found ways of petrifying? And I was like, no. I've got them this size to this size and bigger. I've found some that are so big I couldn't even begin to think about bringing back to my office. So yeah, someone just mentioned boiled egg theory. Yeah, the yolk. When you look at the yolk of the egg and the white of the egg, it's liquid until you boil it, and then it turns hard, and that only takes 8 to 10 minutes in boiling water. And so what would happen if you had way more heat? What if you had so much heat that the external part of the body was being utterly destroyed? Then what you would have is an interesting scenario where the chest and abdominal cavities, which are holding all the organs, that itself is a big, thick, fatty bag, right? And then the organs are within that bag, and they're in their own sacs as well, but they're suspended in liquid. So you've got a pressure cooker, essentially, where these organs are just floating around, but they're also in these protective coatings that are flexible in a way that an eggshell isn't. If an egg is cooked too much, too fast, it cracks and the protein starts to leak out of the egg. But if you had a flexible shell, then it would expand or contract, as needed while the rest is being destroyed, and it would have the opportunity to harden far more before it was damaged in some way. So that was my theory. And Lenny Time, who's in there in the chat, he's a shout out to Lenny. He has a PhD in I think it's molecular chemistry, and we've had a lot of conversations over the years about this subject, and he finds it really fascinating. I keep waiting for him to write to me one day and say, I've done it. I figured it out. And I've got some petrified organs that I've made for you. But I'm a vegetarian. I'm not going to go to the butchers and buy organs to toy with. So somebody else is going to have to do that. I've done my part.
Totally. I was listening to your channel all morning, so excited to come and share with you. And I was listening to these new descriptions of, how the heart is not really a pump. That's not the best way to describe it. And in fact, the concept of a double helix, this give and this take. And one thought yeah. And I think I had a pang of sadness that we use the word suck in a negative context. In so many words, I see that our own language is kind of is abusing.
And sick is good.
Yes, it's sick is good. Yeah, we totally invert things in so many ways. But when I heard that aspect of how the heart works as a double helix, so part of my path, much like you had lived it in 7 star forts, and now the star forts are like central to your destiny. Part of my path is I've been studying Capoeira for over 20 years. And it wasn't until 20 years into it, I go and I read Plato's Republic, and they state explicitly that the foundation of true building of understanding of the realm should start with gymnastics and music. And I realized that's it. That's my whole jam. I'm already there, Plato. Take me to the next level. But when you mentioned that the heart is actually double helix, doing a give and a take, I see the capoeira roda, two players giving and receiving and responding to each other. And that pericardium, the sac that creates the sacred space, the roda itself, the ring, the circle, that's the band. That's where the music comes from that commands the players to adjust
Hmm.
to the rhythm.
Well,
And
sorry to rain on your parade there, but the band itself is the heart muscle. So in order to expose the heart muscle, or I mean the band, it's known as the myocardioventricular band. And just to break down the word, myo means muscle, cardio is the heart, obviously. Ventricular, the ventricles are the two biggest muscle portions of the heart, and those are the main chambers. So when the heart is contracting, those are the ventricles. So myocardioventricular band. So the way he discovered that, he was dissecting hearts for he is Francisco Torrent Guasp, who was a Spanish cardiologist who was the one who discovered this. And he discovered it like 50 years ago or something. It took like 25 years before the world woke up to what he was discovering, and his colleagues were, laughing at him when he tried to present his theories, and it still hasn't disseminated into the mainstream consciousness. It's not being taught in the school books, and it's not even being taught to cardiologists, which is an absolute crime, because the people who are literally doing surgery on the heart don't understand the basic anatomy of the heart, let alone its function, which is sucking rather than pushing, right? So the way he exposed that was he boiled the hearts, and then he would carefully remove the pericardium, the outer fatty layer, in order to expose the heart muscle. And then once that was done, because he had boiled it and it changed the nature of it, he was able to just literally bluntly dissect the heart using his thumbs and prying the fibers apart. So you have different fibers going in different directions in the heart, and they meet in lines, and those lines are called sutures. And so you can kind of get your thumb in on that suture and pull, and it'll start to separate the fibers. And so when someone wrote "the heart is a rope" on my comments on the YouTube channel, and I was like, okay, whatever, dude. And then someone else did it again a couple weeks later, "the heart is a rope," and then they wrote "the helical heart," and I was like, helix, spiral, helical heart, interesting. So I searched for it, and I found this documentary about this cardiologist's life. And I was utterly blown away, because I'd already been finding these heart stones. And when I watched him unravel it and then roll it back up, I noticed that the flaps and the folds of the heart met in these lines. And I just, my jaw dropped, because I realized that a lot of the stones that I had already gathered had those lines in them, right where they were supposed to be. So I had the overall shape, and I had the indentations or creases, the openings of the aorta and the vena cava, which are the two biggest blood vessels in the body, are coming out the slightly behind and at the top of the heart, and then the aortal arc, and then it tapers in when there's contraction. But those lines were there. And then later in the video, there was also this animation that was showing the heart contracting. So I had no idea, but the heart fibers themselves are also helical. So you have the toroidal blood flow in two directions, two opposite rotating vortexes, right? And then you have the exact same thing that's happening in the fibers of the heart. And they prove this with, they proved it first in an interesting way by taking a cow's heart and clamping off the ends, and then filling it with gas, and then the heart expanded. And as expanded, they did CAT scans. They're basically taking X-rays, cross section X-rays as it's expanding and contracting. And this was in that documentary about his life called The Helical Heart. And you can literally see the fibers doing the dual vortex. So the fibers are doing it, and the blood flow is doing it. And and then the last thing that was just, it sent me through the roof is if you look at the heart from the bottom, and it contracts like this, right? Because of the spiral fibers. So there's your toroidal contraction. And so I went and I looked at the rocks again, and sure enough, you can see there's like I call it it's like a propeller twist that you can these two you can, I mean, some of them it's so prominent. This one is pretty obvious. You can see the twist in it. Like how is this going to form banging around with other rocks on a river bottom?
And how do you have so many that are almost the same? They're like
identical. And like, so if I give you a list of different attributes that I'm looking for in a heart stone, right? Or a stone that looks like a heart, right? And the more specific that the attributes are, the more difficult it should be to find. And the longer that list, the harder it should be to find. So if I give you a list of like, I want a rock that's this shape, and you know, and I just rattle off a bunch of random things that I would expect to find, that's going to be a very hard rock for you to find. But I've gone out live in the field and literally found dozens of them in the space of about 15 minutes. So it's far too repeatable, scalable, specific to be just random chance from erosion. And so I reject the notion. Here's another. You can see that there'll be like an indentation at the top, and then you get this curved or faceted front. And then there's another very specific feature, which is one side, the thicker of the two ventricles, that's the thickest part of the heart muscle. That's going to be wide. And then if you look at the other side, it's like a knife edge. So you get this twist at the bottom, you get the knife edge, you get a tapering in on the sides because the heart is contracting, and as the blood is exiting the heart, the sides go in, and then the back side will be either flat or slightly concave. And that's a hell of a lot of attributes already. And then when you add to that those lines that I was just talking about, and having the lines curving and placed in the right places, to me, it's astronomical. Anyone who's like, oh, it's just random chance, or you're cherry picking, that's, you have apophenia, which is, it's like the pattern version of pareidolia, right? Where you're recognizing a pattern that doesn't exist. Pareidolia is where you recognize something visually that doesn't really exist, right? Well, the apophenia would be the pattern version of that. Cherry picking, apophenia, oh, you don't know shit about geology, so it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, you think you know what you're talking about, and it's like all these things. I'm like, well, yeah, but if I'm right about any of this, then major portions of geology are wrong, and that means you people are paradigm blind because you've been taught all of this stuff that doesn't actually match reality, and then we're just expected to believe what they tell us because it's in the school books and we have to regurgitate it to pass tests.
The accusations of apophenia and pareidolia, as if those were negative traits or perceptions, is basically like a colorblind person telling everyone that can see color properly that they're crazy. Like those are superpowers. Apophenia and pareidolia are superpowers. They are. There's something there that you're seeing beyond. Like it's reading through the lines. You're seeing the esoteric part of reality. Gabe, this is totally a tangent back to something you said a few minutes ago, and I don't want to take us off the Heartstone weave, but I don't know where else to put this in, because you mentioned gymnastics and music being the entry point to the mysteries, according to Plato. Is that what you said precisely?
Yes, because gymnastics give actionable application to geometry.
Okay, so check this out. This top word, this is the Greek word that is translated in modern English as hymn, like a religious song. So it's upsilon, mu, nu, omicron, sigma. That would transliterate into English letters more specifically as like YMNOS. And then below you have the word that we translate gymnos, where we get gymnastics from. It's the exact same word as the word for hymn or music, religious music, but with a gamma at the front, a G at the front. Now, when in Greek you see the letter gamma at the beginning of a word, it typically functions as a Y. So it's like the word we see spelled Gyro, but it's actually pronounced gyro or hero.
Yep.
So literally, if you pronounce this the way it would be pronounced, it's umnos and humnos. the same exact word for gymnastics and for religious music. I just thought you would get a kick out of that. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, no, I did not, but I love how this works. Capoeira is a remnant of the Corobantes, and the Corobantes are still paid in the Olympics in the acrobatics. We think that Greek was so long ago, but there's something still preserved. Even in English, we are repeating these echoes. And in India, they have something called karali payatu, which is yet again another expression of these masters of gymnastics. And that's kind of what I do mentally when I play with anagrams. I willfully bend these letters to reveal other fractal truths to what has been said. That's fun. That's a good one.
Like this?
Yeah, man. Thank you. Mike, I've been thinking about you ever since I put this one together. You know the old saying
Definitely.
about three men feeling an elephant and describing a snake. I recently watched the telepathy tapes, which are really fascinating. I recommend them to anybody who hasn't checked it out. But the word telepathy anagrams into the word elephant, and the three blind men are fighting over this elephant and describing a snake. And that's a really fun little anagram.
A tree trunk, a snake, a rope. Yeah. 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 I've used the elephant in the room multiple times. There's some great photos out there that people have made of, different elephant scenarios, and I've used them for thumbnails because it's a fun topic.
And it really fits too if you consider the world rather than this inert ball of matter that we're taught by the science trademark. Instead, considered as a living organism. The elephant in the room, the elephant is the room. Like the whole world is the elephant. And all the life forms are body parts off of one life form. And we're just these blind men thinking that each of these various body parts are separate objects or separate lives. But when you have expanded consciousness experience, you feel really clearly, perceive very distinctly that it's all one life.
Yeah.
Well, and go ahead.
I like the term hylozoism. I think I'm saying that right. Might be hyloi. Hylozoism is the worldview that everything is alive on some scale. And even Plato says that the stone is nothing but music that is at a standstill. Even the stone is music at a standstill. And I love that because that's kind of the worldview I take on.
Yeah, well, and this, we mentioned toroids before, and this, world cosmological model that Martin Kenny came up with, and everything is frequency and vibration, and so cymatics and these other topics for me, they all wove perfectly in. And that's the thing, if you're trying to come up with a more comprehensive model for what this place is, the more things that dovetail, the more you're on the right track, in my opinion. Like it's you eliminate things through the neti principle of not this, not that, and then what's left is hopefully closer to the truth. And then when you find that those things that are left are all dovetailing and overlapping in ways that actually make sense logically and visually, and then you might be getting closer to what this is. It's
yes, the neti technique in Platonic speak might be called the apophatic reasoning, and apophatic sure sounds a lot like elephant as well. I've been low grade obsessing on the elephant, and I had no idea we were going to meet, Mike. I had no idea. I've been at it for almost a year now. It's such a fun culmination to come and meet you, buddy.
Well, what are some other things that because I know how your mind works. Or I don't know how it works, but I've watched it in action multiple times. And
It works somehow. We know that it does.
We can go from the elephant to the trees also, and just discuss different words in a moment, because there's a lot there in the etymology. And so I'm curious first, though, about like what else you might have come across when it comes to elephants.
Yes, Chance, can you pull up the periodic table of elephants? I call this it's the Parvati's little table of elephants. And if you flip the periodic table upside down, sure enough, you have very much like the front feet and the back feet of the elephant. And the way they put the periodic table, I've actually unfolded the trunk. That extra branch of the periodic elements is very much like the trunk of the elephant.
Apophania AF.
Oh yeah, man. And they, Parvati is the mother of Ganesha. And Ganesha is parthogenetically created. She makes this child herself so he can be the vanguard over her sanctuary in the mountain, as she needs a reprieve. She needs to be away from Shiva for a little while. And so she puts Ganesha as a protector. And when Ganesha shows up, when Shiva shows up, he is mad that this baby has been made without him, and he chops the head off of this baby, and then he's able to get into her sanctuary, and she's completely upset that he's killed her creation. And so to make it up to her, he goes and finds the most beautiful elephant in all the world and takes the head from that elephant and repairs Ganesha and puts him back together. And that story is it's really rewarding. But I was learning the story from my yoga instructor, and she waited until I had already learned the warrior 1, warrior 2, warrior 3, all the moves of the warrior poses. And after I had been able to do the moves on my own, it was then that she filled in the context and told me I was dancing the story of Ganesha. And she told me how the movements of the warrior pose are actually the story of taking apart and putting back together the elements of the elephant.
Wow.
Yes. And so I just love the idea of withholding the keystone of the story so that the student can get the steps, the process figured out. And once the student is able to go through the steps on their own, then you tell them the context that they were dancing in all along. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Ganesha, and I am of the mind that even like you were talking about petrogenesis, right? That the mainstream is stuck on this petrogenesis concept, and I'm thinking, is it petrogenesis? Is it petrogenesis? And is that what we're trying to bring into context to them? Because Ganesh is, the idea of Genesis is a story that nobody can really substantiate. We're kind of like the blind men, feeling back in the past and trying to make the best sense out of it. And in a fun way, I love the idea that Ganesha is a generative origin story. Chance, can you bring up the one with the book?
Well, Ganesha also, going back to the gamma or the G becoming a Y, it's Janus or Janus too. It's right there in the name.
Totally, right? And Janus is looking in both directions, much like Prometheus is forward looking and Epimetheus is backwards looking, progressivism and conservatism. Well, in a really fun way, in the Dharma of Ganesha, I believe he's locked in a prison for a while and he needs to break his own tusk. And he uses his tusk to actually write his story. I think he uses his own blood to write his story while he's in prison. And so a lot of people will correspond Ganesha to Thoth. And I think it's because, much like Thoth, Ganesha uses his own body as the stylist, as the writing device. So he's self-generating his creative needs out of his own tissue. He's self-providential. And I just love the idea of genetics as also the unfurling of an infinite story going backwards to the beginning right there. Kind of looks like a book too when you flap those ears out.
Well, that makes sense because Ganesha was the deva of intellect or something like that. Basically, wisdom god, that whole symbolism, which is the main symbolism of all the gods.
Right. And this, so when Thoth created writing, he then went to his higher ups, I forget who it is, and he says, "Hey, I invented something that will improve humanity. I invented writing so that so they can build and build and build and become greater and greater and greater." And his patriarch says, "You fool! Now they're going to be dependent on literacy to remember, and they won't self-provide. They won't depend on themselves." Much like when I was a kid, I knew everybody's phone number, and when I looked at them, I was like, "Oh yeah, 875-8167." You know, I knew my best buddies, and even the people that weren't even close to me knew their phone numbers. It was a thing of pride to be self-providential with knowledge. But now our phones do it all for us. You know, even with autocorrect. Even with autocorrect, you know, I love to spell things wrong on purpose, but my autocorrect is always coming in, and I call it autocorrect. It wrecked what I was trying to say.
I still remember some of those old numbers.
I do too. My best friends in high school, my parents' home phone number, that's locked in.
Right.
They also call, by the way, they call Ganesha the god of new beginnings as well. So that's to the Janus connection. That's the beginning of the year, the gates of the year. They invoke Ganesh when they're kicking something off, like a new business or new venture. God, also the god of letters and writing, remover of obstacles. They also call it that. So back to the idea of the cycles. I think it's fascinating that your work, Mike, has basically, through the investigation of this potential giant elephant, taken you to the place of understanding the beginning and ending of the world and cycles that are contained within that threshold, that periodic threshold. Almost like there is, I say almost like, I mean, I think there is, there's an archetypal energy related to the elephant and this concept. You know, what elephants are said to be pertaining to memory too, right? Well, what's the hardest thing to remember is before you're alive or before the age that you're in. You know, in letters, words, writing, that's all for the transference of memory into the future. So if you catch my drift, it's like through the archetypal energy contained within this symbol that nature presents us called elephant, and this is a shamanistic thing, essentially, that this is like animal medicine. The medicine of the animal called elephant is to help us remember, like, before our cycle or before our life or long-term into the future. And it's like you tapped into that or something.
Well, they say the elephant never forgets, right? But I suppose the elephant would forget if all of history had been obfuscated and inverted and turned inside out. And so we've definitely, you know, Graham Hancock's famous line is, "We're a species with amnesia." I think that's so true. And the more you dig into the hidden history of this realm, the more you find that basically nothing we're taught was true. And if there is truth, it's like woven in with the lies and inversion. So you've got to be someone like Slick to start to sort it out and figure out how it all fits together.
Well, it's like the truth is actually, the truth is always told to us, but it's not the truth we thought we heard. You know what I mean? It's like you got to read between the lines, but that's why I don't like to get, I mean, I'm not saying you do, but I don't like to get hung up on we're being lied to, we're being tricked so much, because I look at this as a giant mind construct that we're these fractal smaller minds within a larger mind. And one of the philosophical foundations that I rest upon is that truth, by the definition of truth, is everything that exists and all that exists. So any situation, large or small, that you're perceiving, the truth is always there in front of your eyes, coming into your ears. You can smell the truth, but it's our filter systems that we've built up through conditioning and like trauma conditioning that allow us to trick ourselves into believing things that are distortions of the truth or lies. So my point being, like, the truth is never missing from the equation. It's just up to us to figure out how we, to unfilter ourselves enough and get into the raw stream of experience and sense data that that I think pareidolia and apophenia is actually an expression of. It's part of it.
I would say that even when you're given a lie, it's on you to pressurize it, to put pressure on it, to put your will upon it, and it will reveal what was hidden when you pressurize it. Mike, it's so impressive that you went to the mountain yourself. It's so impressive. I respect you so much, my friend. You're a field researcher, but I just want to spell that FEELED. You went out and you fielded it with your hands. You engaged it. You put pressure on what people want to just sit back and say, no, I don't want to believe it. I'm going to make a judgment from afar. You actually went in the cave. You know what I mean? Mount Go is so amazing. And then when you were done revealing the truth, putting pressure on the lie, Google Maps came along and tried to blur out the image so people can still stay home on their armchair and and stay in ignorance. I totally respect that, my friend.
That was such a hilarious event,
Speaking of Google obfuscation, by the way, this is just a funny side note. When I was putting together the stream, I was going to use the title something along the lines of "Standing on Titans" or "The Shoulders of Titans," and I Googled Stellium7 with that phrase to see if that was like constantly overused in the title. And Autodidactic did it, but I was like, oh, it's all right. I'm still going to use it. But Google gives me this AI search result, and it's like "Standing on Titans is a fantasy book series written by Stellium7. There are X amount of books," and then it described the plot and the main characters. And I'm like, this shit is completely made up out of the blue. And that's what is at the top of people's Google search results now. It's just made up stuff. And, it's freaky. I mentioned this to my wife, and she's like, I remember getting AI search results when I was Googling stuff about like what's safe during pregnancy. God knows what it's just making up because it thinks that sounds good. I can't believe that's there. It's just unbelievable. So anyway, you didn't write that book series, did you?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's almost as though gaslighting is proof of proximity to the truth. You know what I mean?
I mean, it could be just some rendering glitch that took place on Google Earth. I mean, it could easily be explained away by someone at Google as like, oh, he does, this is ridiculous. But it's interesting that after putting out 3 or 4 videos on the mountain and going into detail about the anatomical correlations that existed in the eye socket and in the ear, that.
This is it. I left it
Arcane
open.
Ascension series. Wow. I'll have to get busy on those. I didn't realize I was going to write those yet.
The main character, Corn Cadence, CC.
What the heck? It's like so bizarre.
I don't understand.
Wow.
Totally
it might be a real book series, but then it's claiming that it was written by Stellium7. I don't understand it. Maybe that is a real book series.
Now I have to write them just because. At least I got my title already. Right. But there was, I mean, you were talking about feeling and before, and intuition obviously ties into feeling, and then that ties into synchronicity as well, because we have these feelings about things, and then we kind of go down a line of thought or investigation, and find stuff we never would have imagined. And that's really what happened when it came to the mountain. If it wasn't in my backyard, literally, this would never have happened, because I'm such an analytical left brain mind when it comes to, these kinds of things. And that's why I was so methodical about how I went about it, and really trying to adhere to the best of my ability to the scientific method. I think the scientific method, is a wonderful tool. It has its weaknesses when it comes to the immeasurable, obviously. You can't really apply it very well to consciousness or intuition, that sort of thing. But so as I started to look into the mountain, there were all kinds of synchronicities that were happening also. And I've actually done videos on the subject of synchronicity, just telling the tales of different things. Like, for example, one of the biggest ones was, we were talking about Guasp, who's this cardiologist that made this incredible discovery. And I was watching this documentary about his life, and at the end of it, it said Denia, Spain. And I'm like, what? And that's literally the town next to me. And then I found out that not only did he live in the town next to me, he was dead. He died 17 years ago. But he lived and worked his whole career out of, he had a family medical practice out of his home. And then in his spare time, he would get hearts from the butchers and experiment. His home is on the foothills of Mont Go. And it's still there. Like, there's a foundation for Francisco Torrent Guasp. Like, what are the odds of that? That's like, you can't even begin to calculate. And I've like I said, I've done videos, I've done multi-hour streams sharing all of the different synchronicities. I mean, we've been talking about elephants a lot. Elephant synchronicities. I went to the water conference in Portugal, met a bunch of wonderful people. Veda Austin was there giving a talk. Jerry Pollack was there. And I got to meet and talk with a lot of people. And at one point, I'm standing outside of the hotel, and I'm talking with a guy who is a documentary filmmaker. And we hit it off, and I told him about my channel, and I gave him my the name of the channel. And then the next day, there was a woman who was presenting a documentary that she'd done on the subject of water, who happened to be very enamored of the subject of elephants. So throughout this documentary, she had this beautiful footage that she'd woven in that was elephants in different scenarios. And I'm like, that's wonderful. I love that. And so then it turns out, and I found out, I can't remember if I found out the same day or the next day, but she's also a documentary filmmaker. And she had done an award-winning documentary on the subject of elephants. And so then the next day we're in the lunchroom, and I wanted to sit down with her because I wanted to just pick her brain and talk to her and share with her the things that I had done. And this other gentleman, who was also a documentary filmmaker, he sits down, and three of us are having lunch. And at one point I was like, "Yo, you mentioned you were a documentary filmmaker also. What have you done documentaries on?" And he's like, "You're not going to believe this." He pulls out his phone. He was he had done documentaries for Disney. And one of the documentaries that he did was called Elephant. So I've got me with my Unveiling a Titan series, this woman who's this award-winning documentary filmmaker from Sweden. And I surprised her because I lived in Sweden for 10 years. I did my entire chiropractic education in Swedish. And I surprised her when I told her that, I started speaking to her in Swedish. And I thought, I loved your documentary, and it's a beautiful film. So that was crazy. Then the next day, there was another woman. You're not going to believe this. There's another woman. Well, you will believe it, because I know how you guys think. And she was presenting on frequency-specific microcurrents. That was her talk. And at one point, she pulled up a photograph of herself, and off in the distance was a mountain. I'm like, that looks like an elephant, kind of. And it's like, no, it can't be Mont Go. And she said, and this is a photograph from my house on the Costa Blanca in Spain, in a town called Javia. And she said, and I've heard there's someone else in the room who's also from Javia. And she was referring to me, and someone else had. I'm like, what? So there's Mont Go, like in a picture, in a random presentation in Portugal on, in a water conference. And so we ended up meeting a couple weeks later and having lunch here in Javia. It's like we've hit it up. We're good. We're friends now. So that's just like, how many synchronicities is that? I could go on and on with them. Like GWASP. There was a woman who was a cardiologist who reached out to me, and she had seen my videos, and she was a Spanish cardiologist from Barcelona, and she watched the Unveiling a Titan series and was blown away by it, and was coming to the area with her boyfriend, who was also a medical doctor. And she didn't even know about my Heartstone research. And she's a cardiologist. And so she was coming here, and she wanted to see the mountain, and she invited me out for dinner. And so we, the four of us, my partner and I, we went out for dinner with her and her boyfriend. And then I took him up to the Eye of Montgo the next day, and then brought him back to my office after that and showed him the Heartstones, and they were a little puzzled by it. And I showed him too many. I should have just pulled out the best ones, and focused on those. But I'd been trying to get in touch with a man named Manel Ballester, who was a cardiologist in Barcelona, who started the first heart transplant center in Spain. And the reason I wanted to reach out to him is because I interviewed Tom Cowan on my channel. Tom Cowan wrote a book called Human Heart, Cosmic Heart, where he was discussing the vortexual flow, and it's a beautiful book. And I got that book, and the first thing I did is I went to the index, because I wanted to see like where has he made mention of GWASP, right? There was no mention of GWASP. He didn't know about GWASP when he wrote the book. He was coming from a Rudolf Steiner background. And, Rudolf Steiner said one of the most important things a person needs to know in order to really wake up to the nature of reality is to understand that the heart is not a pump. Like, that's a kind of important bit of information coming from Rudolf Steiner. And so I was thrilled to read this book. And so that was why I wanted to interview Tom Cowan, because GWASP, there's no mention of GWASP in the book. And so in that interview, he mentions Manel Ballester, who had participated in their End of COVID series. And so he was trying to put me in touch with him, but I had sent an email that I forgot to hit send. It was in my the drafts folder. And I was like, oh, he must be a busy guy. He never got back to me. Well, it turns out I never sent the damn thing. But this woman who randomly reached out to me because she saw the Elephant series was formerly a colleague of Manel Ballester's and was friends with him. So she put me in touch with him. And like 2 days later, he calls me on WhatsApp he's on vacation in Greece. And we start talking, and I start showing him the best of the Heartstones at that point. And he was just like, this is incredible. It's an amazing discovery. And this is literally probably one of the greatest living cardiologists alive. He's continued to help push, the work of GWASP forward. And I mean, it just goes on and on. And then I go to Mexico to the Anarchapulco conference. And at the conference, I meet Adam Bigelson, who's the holographic blood work guy. I don't know if you're familiar with his stuff. And
I've had him on with his brother.
You have, good, yeah. And his girlfriend is a woman named Ana Maria Oliva. You should interview her. She's a powerhouse lady. She's got a PhD in I can't remember what. It's some super heady scientific thing, but she's also totally on the intuitive side. And the three of us sat down for lunch, and I started talking about the Heartstones and the helical heart, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with GWASP's work. And I'm like, you are? Because most even cardiologists don't know it. And she says, yeah, I used to work with Manel Ballester. So like two different women, completely different circumstances that I've met randomly, have both worked with the man who was Francisco Torrent GWASP's good friend for like 17 years. In fact, GWASP wanted to do a dissection of the hearts of human hearts, because he'd only done animal hearts, but it's not like you're allowed to do that. But he became friends with Manel Ballester, who started a heart transplant clinic. So anytime they were going to do a transplant, he would call up GWASP and say, hey, we've got one. And GWASP would drive the 4.5 hour drive to Barcelona to supervise the dissections. And then he proved that it was the same pattern that was happening in in the hearts of cows and pigs and other species, it was identical in human hearts as well. So anyway, that's my weave on that one. Synchronicity, it's so important, you know.
Yes.
I definitely have some stuff to riff on with what you're talking about, especially the many layers of synchronicity, but then the similar patterns between hearts as well, and like have a idea about why the hearts are what remains. You know, why you have all these heart stones when the rest of the bodies are gone. So last Wednesday, I did an incredible episode with Mario from Symbolic Studies about a book called The Reign of Quantity and the Signs of the Times. And that whole conversation was about wrapping our minds around the idea of the quality versus quantity question, that quality and quantity are the two poles that make up our material universe, the quality being referential to essence and quantity being the sensible nature of things, the physicality of things. And in the modern age, maybe possibly a defining trait of the Iron Age or the Kali Yuga is that people's perception of reality has been inverted to put the quantity or the sensible or the material on top of the essential. Or another way of putting it, to believe that qualities arise from the bottom, as in like a bottom up construction of the universe, like matter itself, something about the matter itself is what gives the matter its qualities. Whereas the more proper orientation would be to understand the essence of things, or the spirit or the quality of a thing is condensed down into a material form. So making sense of that was the whole conversation that Mario and I had, and all the different ways that has confused people in modern times. But considering the Heartstone, for example, right? What if there was one qualitative, essential aspect of what makes a heart a heart? In my opinion, it's the idea of constancy, or steadiness. That the heart just keeps going constantly, steadily, the whole life. It never stops. It's always there, doing its thing, right? So when you consider that basic quality of, like, regardless of if someone's got a bad heart or a good heart, an evil heart or a loving heart, it is steady. It keeps doing what it's doing. So that's the essential quality of heart. And then when we look at these heart stones, what are they? They're continuous and steadily, showing up. They're always there. They stick around. They don't go anywhere. They continue to express their quality in a steady fashion. Now, when we have this belief of the material world somehow creating its qualities out of its material, like the idea in the body that somehow the body and its configuration gives rise to consciousness, we're considering that the greater thing is coming from the lesser, and that's backwards. But in that worldview, synchronicity, like you're talking about, seems impossible or schizophrenic, right? But
Right.
in the proper orientation of our perspective, we would say that, well, the qualities of your experience, or the qualities of your soul, or your attention, you could even say what qualities your attention is focused on is forming the material world, condensing out of those qualities. Meaning that's why you're running into these people that are all, on the same tip as you with this kind of obscure but brilliant heart doctor, right? And that's just maybe a possible way to understand synchronicity in general. Now, in the conversation I had with Mario, one of the things we had to leave out of reviewing about this really incredible book was just talking about, like, the scientific method itself as a symptom of quantitative thinking that doesn't really add up. And like, I'm just like everybody else. I will sometimes in the past put in front of a statement like, but I believe in the scientific method, or but science isn't the problem. It's just these people doing science wrong. Yet we never really talk about the replication crisis, that the majority of people's experiments are not replicatable. And in this book, The Reign of Quantity, Guinan talks about, an aspect of the Kali Yuga, or the quantitative reign is the tendency to uniformity, where everything is tried to be made the same, essentially. And what he talks about in reference to the scientific method and the illusion of statistics is basically that no amount of facts will ever prove a theory. One fact or a million facts can never prove a theory, particularly because even if there were no differences, this is a direct quote from the book, talking about replication of an experiment, for example. Even if there were no differences left, other than those arising from the ever-changing influence of time and place, they could still never be entirely negligible. So basically, if we have this belief that the time and space are pure quantity, that they don't have any quality to them, disregarding the fact that like East is different than West, or 12 p.m. is different than 12 a.m., which are obviously those things are different, meaning that there's qualitative differences temporally and spatially. All of that basically boils down to the fact that there is no repeating of the exact same circumstances in the exact same way, and that all of this scientific materialism and the scientific method itself is pretty much just derived out of the rationalist movement of philosophy. And I just had to share this one for Gabe because it wasn't in our stream last week, but one of the greatest burns I ever heard about rationalist philosophy, where Guénon says, "It may be remarked incidentally that the contentions of philosophers are often much more justifiable when they are arguing against other philosophers than when they pass on to expound their own views. And as each one generally sees fairly clearly the defects of the others, they more or less destroy each other mutually."
Wow.
I was like, that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's rationalism in a nutshell. And science in a nutshell. They all destroy each other mutually. So like,
I've got several things to add to that. So
good.
I can't remember whether it was Descartes or Darwin. One of the two of them said that, well, first of all, it's interesting because this is materialism and mechanism, that the foundations of our current quantitative paradigm is based on the works of, I can't remember which one, but the idea that that the universe can be known through weights and measure. And this is interesting because I think it was in one of their diaries, he says that this came to him in a vision from an angel. So like here we have the basis of our materialistic, mechanistic worldview, which is so sick and screwing everything up, is coming from an intuitive insight from some angel. It's just the contrast of those two is hilarious. And
you could maybe postulate that angel was doing something good by planting that idea in the right person at the right time to hasten the reign of quantity and it's
the quickening.
The quickening, exactly, because it's all part of the process. Like the degradation has to occur because the way back to the head of the snake in the Ouroboros is through the tail. You don't go back the way you came. You gotta get down to get up. You gotta get up to get down. You know what I mean? Like the bottom becomes the top. But I don't mean to cut you off.
That's all right. So another thing, I mean, being American, we come from a culture that's very much like, if this is good, then more is better. So it's more about quantity than quality. In Sweden, it's the opposite, or it was once upon a time. There's more and more like the U.S. in many ways nowadays. But they have this concept called lagom. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but basically the easiest way to think of it is not too much, not too little. And it comes from the Viking era, and log means team and ohm means round. And so it comes from the story I've heard, and who knows if it's true or not, but the basic idea is you got these Viking marauders that have their camps and they're sitting around the fire, and they use one cup and one bowl and they pass that around. And so as the bowl or the cup comes to you, the question is, you're looking around and maybe there's a limited quantity of food. How much do you take? And you take not too much, not too little. Because if you take too much, you're depriving your teammates of what they might need to sustain themselves. And if you take too little, you're depriving yourself, which will weaken you, which means that you won't be strong enough to support them. So that was a term that I was really enamored of when I first moved to Sweden. I'm like, wow, what a refreshing mindset, to be seeking some kind of balance between quantity and quality. And that's, the middle way is what we need.
Very mercurial, especially considering that the word is basically log, like logos, and ohm, like two deity words put together.
And ohm round, like the Ouroboros, right?
Totally. I often joke that when it all is boiled down, that science is really the art of apologizing for how wrong you were. It should be an ideal world. I'm a big fan of Socrates, who knew nothing but the fact that he knew nothing at all. And by that virtue, he was the wisest man in Athens.
Do you mean Socrates? That was a joke.
I don't know. And back on Descartes, a lot of people just kind of let it slide. They embrace the Cartesian perspective, and they just kind of overlook the fact that he really is the principal publicly known claim that whatever this divine force is, that maybe it's malevolent. That's I call that a stowaway. That's when you take the Cartesian worldview, there's a stowaway that a lot of people just kind of let it slide, that he's the one who postulated that maybe this is all a big joke, and whatever the divinity is not looking out for our best interest. And I think that's fascinating. A lot of people call that the archons, the evil archons controlling things, but that's a stowaway to the Cartesian worldview. And the
demiurge, Yaldabaoth, Yahweh, like many names for this entity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mike, I wanted to ask you, have you ever heard that how to identify the difference between an elephant from India and an elephant from Africa? Have you ever heard how to determine the difference?
Is it tusks? No.
The shape of their ear is the shape of the continent. The continent of India is in the shape of an elephant from India. And the shape of the ear from African elephant is in the shape of the continent itself. And that is a coinkydink on a scale that kind of tickles my fancy, because I love questioning the map. I just love questioning the map. And that one, kind of plays into some of the shapes I extract from what they give us as the map of the realm.
There's a guy, I think his channel is called Riven, if I remember correctly, and he's done a lot of looking on Google Earth and finding continental size elephants and from all different directions. And I look at that stuff and I'm like, wow, it's cool, just like I did with Roger, his dragon and fish in the Sahara. But to present that as proof of something, I think, is a mistake. It's an interesting data point. It's a factoid that's fun. So there's a lot of people out there that are looking at stuff on Google Earth, and they're finding patterns and seeing faces and creatures of different kinds, and then they're just 100% convinced that what they're seeing there is real, and that it was a creature. And it's like, okay, well, it might be, but you gotta get on the ground, and you gotta do way more research before you could even begin to claim that that's the case. And in fact, a lot of those shapes, if you were to just turn it upside down, you would probably see an entirely different kind of creature. So there's a huge number of people that are suffering from pareidolia, and I did a 4-hour live stream on that subject, because not only is pareidolia a real thing, but now we have the advent of AI. So everyone is falling for stuff that, I mean, it's just in the last year, it's gotten so sophisticated now. I've been fooled a few times. And, you know, it's only going to get worse when it comes to not being able to determine reality from fiction when it's on a screen. So boots on the ground becomes that much more important. And I've, you know, what I've done with the Unveiling of Titan series and also the approach to the Heartstones is it's really a template for this kind of thing when it comes to pattern recognition and how to go about actually properly investigating a potential Titan, because nobody else has done it yet. I would have thought now, years later, that there'd be like some pretty profound research, and it may be that I'm totally wrong about this mountain, and you know, it just happened to be a long series of 50 plus synchronicity or coincidences that line up just perfectly with the idea that this was once a creature. That's a possibility. I do think that, you know, getting into the subject of megaflora, megafauna when it comes to like the trees, because I've done a ton of investigation into the trees as well on my channel, because I think that's the slam dunk when it comes to evidence. Like, people could see all 50 plus of my coincidences with the mountain and still remain skeptics. That's fine. There's a lot of people out there who are more convinced than I am about my own research, which is, you know, I'm constantly like second guessing and doubting myself and wondering, you know, is this just like random chance? Am I delusional, or is this real? And but when it comes to the trees, I have no doubt whatsoever, and the evidence for that is so monumental. And I forgot where I was going with it, but
there's no such thing as chance. Trees. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
Does not exist.
Yeah. No chances.
You know, I love to point out how the word coincidence is kind of a, for one, it has the word dunce in it. So it kind of rhymes with go inside, dunce.
Oh, it's Cohen. It's Cohen dunce. You're a dunce of the priests.
I think of it as a coincidence. It coincides, right? Two things are lining up, and the more specific, the more unlikely it is to happen. And then when you add an element of synchronicity to that, like where I've had many times where I've been walking and I've had a particular thought, and then I look down, and at that exact moment, there's a heartstone just sitting there on the ground waiting for me, and it coincides with some profound thought that I had in the moment. And then boom, it's just like, okay, I don't know. Are we in a construct? Is reality morphing to match my expectations, or is it an egregore kind of a thing where the more attention is focused on this, now everyone's finding these stones, and did they exist before I started talking about them? You know, I have these questions all the time. I don't, you know, Mandela effect and all that. But I've operated from the assumption that there is a real reality, that we have a physical existence, and then what a lot of people think of as the Matrix, I think is just it's an overlay on top of creation. And so I don't know. It's
you know,
have you looked at Fontainebleau in France?
Yeah, I've been sent pictures of that. That definitely looks like petrified creatures.
Let me. I have some.
But I've never had the chance to explore it in person.
It won't be as big as I want it to be, but there's these like reptilian-looking fish.
Yeah,
we're told the science says that this is just a rock.
Yeah, they'll always come up with some reason why it looks like that way. They can, you know, but the question is, can they demonstrate it? Can they show it ever in the process of occurring? Are they talking about hundreds of millions of years? You know,
and there's lots of them all in the same spot.
All the dating techniques are all up for grabs as far as pseudoscience goes as well. Yeah. And then there's the Naga. Are you familiar with that in Thailand? It's like this gigantic snake creature that
it's like a mountain snake.
Do a search for Naga Thailand, an image search.
All right.
Mike, I want to, you know, I love that you call them heartstones, but, you know, with my playfulness with words, the word earth and heart are pretty much the same letters, and so it becomes a earth heart. You know what I mean? It's almost like the coincidence of the words have manifested in what you've discovered.
Oh,
The
it
earth.
gets so much deeper than that. The tree is in there. Treah,
Yeah,
right?
man.
With a silent H.
Yeah, man.
Um, and that reminds me, you mentioned autodidactic earlier, and one thing I heard him say one time that stuck with me is the word tremendous. Trees mend us. Tremendous, and
Nice.
when you look at the names of places, if you understand that tor and tree are the same thing, like toroid, right? That there's a lot of places, like if you look at Santorini, which is this island in Greece that blew its top and wiped out the Minoan civilization. It's got Tor right in the middle. But not only that, its original name was Tira, which means fear, I believe. Thira. So there you have tree again in that. So you have it in both names. You have tree.
It's
And
Tria,
then-
which
and
is
then-
Troy, which is three, which is the Trinity. Tria, Troya.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the meaning of Troy, by the way, is three.
And then Tenerife, you have the word tree in that one as well. I think volcanoes are former trees. That's my theory when it comes to, I think whenever the cataclysm occurred, I think it was very likely a plasma apocalypse or a phoenix event, if you want to use archaics as terminology.
We don't.
Some call it the EMCO, the electromagnetic plasma changeover event. That was Chris Austin Lambert, I think, that coined that term. But all of these kinds of things, I think, we're, like I was alluding to before with Cthulhu and Medusa and the elephant with the trunk and everything. I think we're looking at anthropomorphized plasma apocalypses that when it hits, things turn to stone and floods happen and volcanoes blow, and then you get all this volcanic ash that goes up into the air, which is perfect for the electrical activity of plasma storms. And if you imagine the whole ring of fire blowing at the same time, that would be a pretty cataclysmic event. So I think that when the plasma hit the trees, there was a transmutation of elements, and that's what leads to our radioactive elements. And that's why I think that it's percolating down there, and every once in a while it bubbles to the surface. But that's my take on volcanoes. And when you look at volcanic lava tubes, there's no way lava formed those things.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at former root structures because they bifurcate just like roots do.
Right.
And
right.
and they're all fully formed. They're not like partially there. And the interesting thing, if you look at the grain of the walls of the lava tubes, sometimes it's running parallel to the ground, and sometimes it's concentric circles. So there's no way that's being formed by lava. And
when you think about back to the vortex of the heart, the same mystery applies in terms of how the heart manages to circulate our life force through the body in its vortex pattern. That same applies to trees. Like, how do trees get water from their roots up to the top of the tree? This is Schauberger considerations, but you could possibly reimagine how volcanoes operate if you're going to put the volcanoes were giant trees goggles on.
Right.
In a Schauberger sense, maybe it's the same kind of vortex action that suctions things up from below.
A fractal level up.
Basically.
Yeah. That's why I didn't have a problem with, I already believed from the time I was in my 20s, after I read The Holographic Universe by Talbot, I already believed that we were in, something that, whether it's hologram or not, I don't know, but at least fractal you know, because you can see as you zoom out, there's this repeating patterns, and you zoom in and you see the same kinds of patterns. So yeah, they might just be pores that are opening and closing on
Mike,
a really big creature.
Yeah, I want to slide a couple book recommendations. You may have already delved into a couple of these. Regarding volcanoes, Sigmund Freud wrote Moses and Monotheism. Have you ever heard of that one? I recommend it. It's an easy read. It's not arduous at all. And in
Moses and Monotheism?
Yep, by Sigmund Freud. And he kind of stuck his neck out on this because he's Jewish. And
that was his piece out.
Yep. And he makes a absolutely powerful claim that Yahweh is a volcano god. And this is like, I don't wear these as two-eyed goggles. It's like a monocle that I sometimes take out when I look at mythology as Yahweh as a volcano god. It's very enriching. And then another book I just love to put on your radar is Leviathan and the Air Pump. And I've actually listened to some presentations about the circumstance around the book. That's something I love to do, is I like to actually hear the political ripples that happen because of the book. And so if you get some time to look into that, that's where I discovered that the word theory was relegated to astrology, and the church would not let the word theory come into the mainstream consciousness. And also in that time, the word facts were launched into the public. And the word facts almost ran amok on their own to such a degree that they had to launch prize law. And all the judges have gone out like pirates and captured the facts again. And so this is the birth of the concept of theory and facts coming into our vernacular. So I think those would be really edifying for you. And then you've mentioned Medusa a couple times, and I have gone way into La La Land on Medusa. And I'd love to just share some fun things with you. I've got my zodiac here, and I've actually traced Perseus as he goes through his adventure. And Perseus, you know, he's in Aries, right, almost in Taurus. He's kind of right there in the bridge between Aries and Taurus in the sky. And if you start reading his myth from the beginning and you track every step of his progress through the zodiac, you'll notice that when he's in the earth element, there will be earthy like temples or mountains mentioned. And when he's in the air element, there will be a storm. And when he's in a water element, he's actually sent out on the sea with his mother. And then he's in a fire element, and there's passion between his mother and the person who finds him. So the elements of the zodiac are in a perfect sequence going around, as well as characters in the stars. But just a long story short, just to give you the cliff notes, the moment that he does the cut on Medusa is very much between Capricorn. This is where Medusa she's flown off to an island where other Gorgons, natural Gorgons, live. She's not a natural Gorgon. She's like a GMO Gorgon. And so she's going to live in a Gorgon commune. And this is where Perseus has to track her down, and he sneaks past the two sleeping Gorgons, the natural ones, so he can confront her. In the moment that he slices her, it takes place right after Capricorn as we go into Aquarius, because this is the initiation of Pegasus. And Pegasus flies out of Medusa's head. And when you keep saying a plasma apocalypse, that's fascinating to me, because Aquarius, people say it's an air element. I'm inclined to say it has more to do with plasma and electricity. And Pegasus coming out.
That resonates with me. Also, you know, Perseus, for those who don't know, Perseus is sent on this mission, and he has to behead Medusa in order to use her head to petrify a Titan. Right? So he's his what is it? Princess Andromeda is tied to the giant rock, and the Kraken is going to come up out of the water, sent by
Neptune,
Poseidon. And so he has this whole hero's journey that he has to go through in order to save Andromeda. And what is he doing? He's using the plasma apocalypse to petrify the Titan, which is pretty interesting. And just to weave in another wonderful synchronicity, the Gorgons, the three sisters, Medusa is one of the three. And the name of the river that goes along the side of Mont Go is Gata de Gorgos. It's the road of the Gorgons, which is Medusa. So literally, you've got Guaspa on one side, and you've got a river named after Medusa on the other side of a petrified giant elephant. Like, what are the odds of that?
I love it.
I was thinking Moana earlier. What's the name of the? Maui is the god, and Maui, and so he's got to defeat this creature and everything, and she. So basically, I'm not sure if he's the one who took it, but someone steals this stone that's very precious to Moana, and she turns into this raging monster that's going to destroy the whole universe. And in the end, he's got to return this to her, I think, in some way. I don't remember the details. But once she gets the stone back and she's, feeling appeased, she lays down and becomes a mountain.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's so revelatory. Right now, Neptune has been lingering in Pisces, and it's going to cross into Aries. It's basically at the location that you're talking about because Andromeda and Cassiopeia and the Emperor Cepheus, they're all right here, minor decans. And Neptune in the sky as we're speaking is actually crossing over the location of that battle. It's been lingering on the equinox line, so it's very timely that we're having that talk.
Just some more weaves with the tree idea. The Ents, you talked about the Oliphants, which were in Lord of the Rings. That's what Legolas takes down, right? When he's sliding down the trunk. And then there's the Ents, which are the tree beings that the hobbits are riding around on. And so that's those are giant trees that are there. And let's see, there was a couple others I was thinking of. Just all these different words that have tree in them: street, reset, and anytime toroid, all of that. That's all related as well. So, yeah. That was all I had.
Nice. Let me think. I'm so excited to talk to you, man. This is so awesome. I was thinking about, have you guys ever heard that the word secular, that it actually has to do with cut away from? Have you guys ever heard that philologically? I tried to look it up again and I couldn't find it. And it's always when you think you know a thing and you go to check yourself that they gaslight you and switch it up just for your sake. But
I'm not sure about that. I do know that in Latin, the word seculum means age. So,
right.
And it's basically could also mean worldly. It's one of those many words where the word for world and age are the same word. And that pretty much applies across the board to the etymology of words relating to world.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought you started off Slick by talking about the torrid meteor showers.
Right.
Tor and meteor has the word tree in it also.
That's hot fire. That's great. Yeah, so I use the word secular. Oh, when I looked it up the second time, I found another definition that says owned by the state owned. The word secular, I think this was in a Black's Law context. Secular means owned by the state.
I guess that's sort of in reference to it being outside of religion in the more modern usage, secularity.
Yeah, maybe.
Neutral or unrelated to religion.
Yes. And, mystically speaking, I was hearing stuck in a state of, or turned to stone, or not likely to change. but I use that word secular, I think, very loosely. But oftentimes, I find that when you're making connections, when you're adding context to people's worldview, if they have a drive for secular thinking, that I heard the phrase that nothing occurs in a vacuum. And I think there's a strange to the what I consider the secular state-owned thinking frame, that they believe that every idea is isolated, that every idea is isolated. And I'm constantly trying to enrich those people's thinking by elucidating at how all things are actually connected. You know what I
That's
mean?
atomism, right? I mean, in a nutshell, mechanism, atomism, it's all
Yeah.
this, it's all particles, it's all just little bits and pieces of things all by themselves that bounce around and hit
Right.
against each other and then eventually lead to consciousness. Like
Right. Right. And they're all dead. They're all a bunch of dead, random,
right.
separate things.
Until the system gets complex enough and then accidentally consciousness emerges as an epiphenomenon, right?
Yeah,
It's
man.
like, grant me one miracle.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
Right.
it.
Everything came from nothing, but it wasn't God. It just, just
Yeah.
everything was there in an infinitely small point, and it all exploded one day. And
I got a
from
schizophrenic anagram
Rob
for you.
Skiba says, from goo to you by way of the zoo. All right.
Check
That was
this
a
out,
great
Gabe.
line.
Secular referring to age and world.
What is
Anagram.
that thing
Whoa.
behind?
Perfect anagram. Circular. Secular.
Brilliant chance. Brilliant. Circular.
Chance, what's floating behind that?
Floating behind what?
Yeah, your background. What is that?
A
Behind?
stone.
No,
On the screen.
He's like,
A circular stone. Is that what you're talking
no,
about?
behind. If you yeah, the what am I saying? The background behind the whiteboard you got there.
It's your
No.
background of the screen.
Yeah,
like
minimize that.
Yeah, if you close your window, what is that image? It looks like a
Minimize.
fossil. It's a
Click.
fossil of some sort.
Oh, okay. If I
Click.
take us off the screen, we can. Is that? It's just the background image I made. I was going for some cool abstract thing.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, like a stone world. I actually almost put googly eyes on it and a mouth so that it was like a rock that was a head, but
Yeah.
I decided that was too much.
So
we're getting close to our wrap up, guys. We got to give some
Yeah, we're almost at the 2-hour mark.
closing
That flew
thoughts
by,
here.
didn't it?
Yeah, I feel like it flew by. I've just been soaking it in. It's been fun. I never thought of circular before. I also think that there's the next level gravy is somewhere in the volcano god question for sure. And I've been thinking a lot about, since I read that Guanan book for last week, he brings up Tubal-Cain and Vulcan being the same concept, that V and B switch between letter swapping of philology, and Vulcan is Tubal-Cain is do Vulcan, essentially, or D Vulcan, like the god Vulcan, which makes sense. It's the smithing god. And if you trace down the volcano smithing forging god, it becomes all of the sun gods together. It's interesting.
Right. Just for anybody who's kind of new to this volcano weave, I just want to put a list of like Hephaestus, Vulcan, Erichthonius, Malciber, Auriga is the constellation that all of these amalgam into. And Auriga, the constellation, is a brilliant pentagonal shape. And so ever since thank you to Mario Garza, by the way, for enriching my life to the utmost by bringing Auriga into my worldview, because he is pentagonal and he has a goat over his shoulders that's very much in sync to the sacrificial striking of the pentagram that fateful day. but he also has two little baby goats on his behind his back, kind of like his kidneys, around his kidneys. He's holding a set of reins. He was the master of the reins because he made chariots. Well, reinas is the word for your kidneys. Mike, do people wear riñoneras in Spain a lot? The hip purse?
I haven't heard that term before, but
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure.
The
I
riñonera.
was just thinking when you mentioned two-ball cane, I can't remember exactly what the connection is, but it's the origins of golf are related to two-ball cane in some way. I can't remember what the connection is, but isn't it interesting that the original golf clubs are made from wood, right? And what are you doing?
Golf
You're
courses
swinging
hide a lot of stuff on that's under them.
Yep. Yeah. There's a whole weave that has to do with star forts, Cemex, the trafficking of individuals, and what lies under golf courses. It's a pretty heavy-duty, dark subject, but two-ball cane, I mean, you're whacking the ball, and you get up onto the green, and what do you have to do? You have to take the tree out of the hole before the ball can go in the hole. You know, there's so much encoded into everything that it's just
and what is
bog-mindling.
That's exactly what it is. A great term. The word golf in reverse is flog, right? And if anybody cares to, last night, the live over on my channel, we were talking about Aristophanes' The Frogs. And one of the hazards on the golf course is, getting caught in the bogs, getting caught in the swamp, all of the sand traps. Yeah, just wanted to throw those on people's radar around the golf courses symbolically.
Quarries also. You've got the star forts, the golf courses, quarries, and usually underground tunneling systems. They're all found together on a regular basis. And then there was one other thing.
For Mike's people that are
just
watching
one
on Mike's
one
channel.
thing that I just saw in my notes is the prime meridian goes right through Mont Go.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if that's significant, but it seemed like it.
Yeah. Dude, the elephant is totally the room, y'all. I did not know that. That's potent. Man, this is a great installation. I can't wait to come back and take all the notes. This was so fun.
Definitely. It was. Thanks for the invite, guys.
Yeah, we can definitely do it again. I mean, we gotta stay in touch with good Sir Mike. And it's been too long since Gabe and I got to be on screen together, as I've been focusing on quality instead of quantity. Not that he's not quality, but that
I
done less episodes.
I saw one of your recent streams, and your baby is beautiful. She's so gorgeous. And
yeah, that's why I'm ready to hang it up so I can go pick up that baby. Oh man, she's talking so much right now. Not like English. Although today Jennifer said hey to her, and the baby went hey. Not even 4 months. I'm pretty sure it was on purpose. But I pulled this up on the screen share for Mike's people. This is where you can find Gabe's channel, Slick Dissident, on YouTube. All kinds of good stuff on here that will melt your paradigm. My channel is InnerVerse Podcast. The episode I was referring to, The Reign of Quantity, you find that as a recent live stream. But I got so much content on here, you would never get to the bottom of it. And
you need a couple thousand hours probably to go through it all. I was looking at just the InnerVerse stuff, not even, I mean, just the what are we on? Vibrant. I mean, it's got a couple hundred of those at least.
This is number 158 of the Vibrants.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. No, 156. 156. So there's a lot there. Also, I want to remind people about, let's see.
Wait a second. 156th prime is 911. It spells SEX. This is a super monumental episode, y'all.
You guys can also work with me for biofield tuning, Mike's people. If you're curious about that, go to innerversepodcast.com/healing. And there's an entire page that will teach you about the anatomy of your energy field, how we can use tuning forks to determine where your limiting conditioning is from trauma and help you resolve it. It's amazing. I mean, if you feel like you're ready to upgrade your mind body connection, check that out. I'm wearing this new shirt that I've never worn on a stream, even though I've had it for a couple months.
Super groovy.
Really?
This is a real tuning fork that I own. It's just been made more spectacular by my wife. My wife made me this shirt.
That's one of those giant tuning forks, huh?
Yep, I got a giant one.
Those things
Mine's
are
bigger than most people's.
And Chance, I hear that you've diversified your services. You're now busting ghosts.
Should we watch that clip?
Scare him
real
out
quick?
of the room. That tuning fork.
Please, yeah.
It's like a 1 minute clip. Let me see if I can pull that up. Actually,
ooh, that was great.
And if I can do a 1 minute clip too, then
sure, right. Dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Just show me where it is.
I can share screen.
I have to download it and re-upload it, so it'll be a second for mine. But yeah,
okay,
when you screen share, there's also needs to be an option selected that allows you to have the sound on if you need sound for the clip, if that's important.
All right, let me just do the share here.
Yeah, Gabe, I'm busting ghosts now.
Share screen. Window, let's see. Window or entire screen? It's not showing that one. There we go, right there. And then where's the audio? To share audio, share a tab or screen instead. Okay.
I think you have to do the whole screen to have audio.
Yep. There we go. All right. You guys see yourselves now? Let's see. There we go. And this is just driving the point home of what we were talking about before with GWASP and the heart.
Heart is wrong. Most everyone today, even doctors, still believe the heart to be a 4-chamber pump that pushes blood through a mind-boggling 60,000 miles of narrowing blood vessels to fuel our 40 trillion cells, then filling again as if by magic on relaxation. Well, that theory was thoroughly debunked by the Spanish cardiologist Francisco Torrent GWASP back in 1972. After dissecting thousands of hearts, GWASP finally discovered the heart's true structure. The heart's far more amazing than we ever knew. It's like a rope, a long tube wrapped into a knot. Instead of being pushed, the blood is pulled through the heart in 2 spiraling vortexes. This has been proven with CAT scans, functional MRI, and positronic emission. Look at the spiraling contraction. It changes everything we know about the heart and circulation. If you'd like to know more, check out these videos.
Excellent. Excellent.
Let's see. Stop screen. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, I'll play mine, but I've got to have everybody muted while I play mine so we don't get like echoey feedback. But here we go. That's a great clip, by the way. Really great. I'm not trying to just glaze past.
Thank you. Took about a week for 1 minute.
So I was watching, or I was talking with Mario, and he was watching this stream on Occult Rejects, and they just brought up a tuning experience this guy had. And it's a really wild story, so fun to share since Gabe mentioned it. Here we go.
I talked to my landlord, and he tells me that the guy who lived here before me, he committed suicide. He cut off his left arm. I'm here. I haven't done anything to cause this to hurt or anything like that. All of a sudden, I get this sharp pain coming from my pectoral muscle, like deep inside of this part of my my arm right here. It swells up to an enormous size. I get a hold of this guy named Chance Garden. He's got the InnerVerse podcast, and he does sound healing. It went away after Chance did his thing. As soon as Chance got done with the sound healing, which I highly recommend, he's really good. He works miracles. Give him a shout out because he works the tuning forks, right? And so when you're using the tuning forks on somebody else's aura from hundreds of miles away, and you're really, really accurate, like You don't have to tell the guy anything. He's gonna narrow in on your problem really quickly. He's that skilled.
That
Give
was a
thanks and praise.
yeah. What a good shout out. So just
Nice
a
testimonial.
little more to that story. He had this, out of the blue arm falling off type of injury that he did nothing to cause. But the context for him had to do with a grief situation, separation from family. And he had just moved because of this, and without giving too many personal details. But the left side of the heart, since we've been talking about the heart, this kind of feels appropriate. In the anatomy of your energy body or your aura, the left side of the heart is where grief and loss and sadness energy can get stuck. So if we're not processing grief and sadness properly, then or there's just an overload of it, like with this dude's situation, and probably was resistant to feel it because there's so much, it's absolutely makes sense that his left arm, left pectoral muscle would have this kind of almost out of the blue injury. Now, on the side of things where he happens to move into an apartment where the previous tenant committed suicide by cutting off the left arm, that's like an example of the quality condensing into the quantity, or his psychic realm, his emotional state, his mental perspective, whatever you want to call it, condenses down into the real world experience synchronicity of moving into a place where the exact injury that he is going to suffer is what happened to the guy before, who must have been in like serious grief to do that to himself. Right. So that being said, there's like it's like a chicken or an egg thing. There is a way to look at these things as if it's an external entity, poltergeist, ghost, what have you. And then there's the compartmentalization of your own life force energy, which is your consciousness that gets stuck, walled off, becomes its own separate entity that is conscious in a way because it's made of your consciousness energy. So is it one or is it the other? I look at it as like you can approach the situation from either way, but you're not going to get anywhere if you stay purely externalized. Like this guy, to heal, he had to face the internal resonance he had to the issue and clear that. But that was a really particularly weird case because I don't ghost attacks, right? Like it's very sensational. Good stuff.
Yeah, you can't just be in your head. Sometimes you have to go spelunking Titan eyeballs.
So Mike, as we're wrapping up, when do you got any plans for coming back, or you want to tell people a little bit more about the book that we never mentioned that is a mind-blowing other part of your life story that gets left out?
It's called The Hacker Prince, and it's telling the story of some events that happened to me between 13 and 18 years old. I got busted as a hacker back in 1985, and I infiltrated Microsoft and Boeing and Sunstrand and Kenworth Trucking and a whole bunch of other companies. But I was charged with 4. I was convicted, and I actually went to jail for it. And I just turned 18, so lucky me, right? It's a book this is actually the 40-year anniversary of my bust. And so I figured if not now, never. So that's one of the reasons I've been absent from my channel for a while. I tend to be really one-minded, and I have a hard time focusing on anything more than one thing at a time. So I've been really working on the book. I'm about to send it off to a proofreader, and planning a book tour. See what I arrange. I'd love to travel a few different places in the U.S. and line up as many interviews as possible for that. It's an unbelievable story. It's called The Hacker Prince, A True Story. So the events were so unusual, I didn't have to embellish at all. It's plenty entertaining as it happened. So, I do have a whole bunch of stuff I can do with a channel, but it's just a matter of getting to it. Each stream I do takes a couple days of planning, and I've stopped the video editing because I could work a month on a single video, and it's seen by the same number of people that would tune into a live stream. So it's not the cost benefit analysis when it comes to reaching people isn't there. Plus, the channel has just been, throttled by Al Gore and his rhythms, and so
Story of my life.
I'm just, I love the people that show up in the chat, and I get a lot of support, but comments are almost non-existent, and not that I need them, but it's just an example of, I can see from the statistics that I'm only reaching the audience that I've been talking to for a long time. It's not getting out to new, even when I do interviews like this, and I probably won't even notice a blip in my channel from this, and it's bizarre. I've interviewed with some really large channels and can't even tell when I'm looking at the statistics on my channel that I did the interview. So it's a little disheartening, but I didn't get into it for, to attract attention. But if I'm going to spend the time on it, I want it to reach people. And so for the time, I need to just focus on these other things and complete this project, because I've started 3 other books that are just waiting for me to finish this project so I can. Oh, Wendy, love you too. Thank you very much. And it's she's one of the world's best mods. Couldn't ask for a better one. And Derp as well. Thank you, Derp. Love seeing you in the chat always. And as far as just I only have the YouTube channel. I've got a whole bunch of backup channels of BitChute. I'm a little bit of a present on X. If people want to just follow my I decompress on Instagram, like just reels. Actually, it's been really fruitful for my channel because I've gotten so much great little tidbits and puzzle bits that have fit incredibly well in with all of my research because of all the damn scrolling I do on Instagram. So it's not been a waste of time, even though it is a waste of time. And so if you want to see where I vent and I share crazy memes and stuff like that, definitely follow me on Instagram, Stellium7 on Instagram. That's where you'll see another side of me that doesn't really make it to my channel. And for people who think the whole Titan thing is a stretch and it's too far-fetched and you can't get on board with it, start with the tree subject. There's a lot of information on my channel. I always refer people to Hangman 1128's channel, which is amazing. He's got the best footage in the world for boots on the ground, actual stuff that you can't imagine how majestic and incredible it is when it comes to evidence. It's like I said before, it's a slam dunk. And if you scroll down on my channel and go down about 10 videos, there's a string of about 10 or 12 videos in a row that are 1 or 2 minutes long. And those are highlights from my tour with him in South Dakota and Colorado that I did last July. And he took me to all of the best sites that he's found in the last many years that he's been doing this research. And if you can't see that is tree when you're looking at it, I don't know what to tell you, but we're talking about if a decomposing tree was, if you picked up a piece of it that was this big, that would be 50 or 100 feet wide. There you go. That's those little clips there will show you what I'm talking about. And it's all HD footage. So a lot of times when I'm doing live streams, it's coming through at 720p or something. And even at 1080, it doesn't do it justice. But Mike's got 4K footage on his channel for this stuff. And it is mind blowing. So yeah, check out the channel and please leave comments because I never get them anymore. It's like, it's rare that people, tell me what they're thinking. And so much has been shared by people over the years that has led to new discoveries. So that's how we do it. It's an open source collaborative effort.
Yeah, man. We are 7 days out from Mars coming out of its retrograde in Cancer. And I anticipate a great amount of throttling from that point going forward in everybody's own path. But that's a perfect time for you to be sending your book to the editorial committee. Very fortuitous.
Editing is done. I just need proofreading and
That's it.
formatting at this point, and then it's ready for upload, and then after that, it's all marketing. Because as a self-published author, if you're not doing a ton of work with marketing, which I hate, it's like I don't even market my own channel, right?
Yeah.
It's like I've been doing all this work for a long time, and it's like that is it's like
God is my
Totally.
advertising agent.
But nothing says marketing better than Mars coming out of retrograde.
Good. That's nice to know. I'm happy to hear there's some auspicious aspects occurring.
I'm in. Year of the Snake. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up, guys. It's been fun.
Yes, Mike, it has been such
Thank
a
you
joy.
very much. Yeah,
Yes,
likewise.
my friend.
I'm so happy to. We gotta connect. Send me some your details so we can pop each other little riffs now and again.
For sure, my friend. It's been a joy, an absolute pleasure. Give thanks
All
and praise.
Peace be unto y'all. Much love.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Take care.